YouTube, what's up? Back again for another daily fishing video here on Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Guys, today we're going to break down why I've been sucking lately and how I can get better. And this is something that's plagued my career for pretty much since the beginning. And it's something that I know that we all deal with day in and day out. And we're going to talk about it and how to adjust from that and what I've done throughout my career to try to change my results a little bit, and it has worked a few different times. But real fast though, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you do that. It helps me to know who wants to actually watch my channel, who doesn't. And if you like this video, just hit that thumbs up and let me know that you do. And comment below if you relate to this particular thing. Also, yesterday I posted a brand new video talking about the Mamba 24 VX. It's a bay boat that sponsors Let's Fish TV. You need to go check that boat out, especially if you're in the market for a bay boat. And it's a pretty cool walkthrough and kind of gives you the ins and outs of that particular boat. But guys, today we're going to talk about, more of a touchy subject for me. Because, don't get me wrong. Am I Jacob Wheeler? Am I Kevin Van Dam? Do I win every other tournament that I fish? Am I Lee Livesay? Good Lord, the dude's won the back-to-back events on Lake Fork. Not to mention the fact that the last bass event on Ross Barnett, he won that one too. So congrats to Lee, for absolutely killing it. But one thing that I have been plagued with in my career is I either do really, really good or I do really, really bad. Rarely do you see me finish in the middle or be ultra, ultra consistent. And I'm saying ultra consistent like a bunch of top 20s in a row. Typically, I'm like a top 10 win kind of guy, or I do really, really bad. And finding that balance is really difficult for me sometimes. But one thing that I've always narrowed it down to is being what's the proper term here? Overly tuned in, overly dialed into my pattern or what I'm catching my fish on. And, one thing that I've been blessed with in my career is I typically can figure out what's going on in a particular place very quickly. Now, there's always some exceptions to that rule. Look at Toho this year. I had one of the worst practices I've had in a really long time, and I had a terrible tournament. And that's just how it goes sometimes. But now you look at a lake like Ross Barnett. Ross Barnett, I was really dialed in. I felt pretty good about the tournament, and I was getting bit flipping. And that was my primary pattern among other guys. There was quite a few of us that had really kind of figured out that flipping deal and kind of understood it really well. And the water dropped and those fish left. And when I say they left, they just poof. And I just never could relocate them. And it got really, really tough on me, so I had a bad event. But, case in point, I got too locked in. And I can go throughout my entire career and give you perfect examples of saying, okay, well, at this particular tournament, I finished 170th because I was too stubborn to change. I'd gotten so many bites, or I'd gotten so locked in on a particular pattern that it ended up burning me like terribly, terribly bad. So the worst thing that I've ever learned in my career is if I get too dialed in early in practice, 9 times out of 10, by the end of practice and by the beginning of the tournament, I'm going to be so dialed in and so locked into that pattern that it's really hard to adjust. And that is a big problem when you're talking about tournament fishing because everything changes every day. Most of the time, the fishing doesn't change. The patterns don't change. That kind of stuff. Like when I got locked in at Cherokee, I figured that stuff out fairly early on the first day of the practice. And it got better. And rarely does that happen. And, Cumberland was the same way. First day of practice, I was on the phone with Val and Kane on their way to school. And went to a bluff in and started flipping. Had a few bites and kind of kept going back to that during practice. And it kept getting bites and it kept getting better as well. My point is does it work? When you get so locked in, does it work? Does it maintain? Yes. Obviously, I am proof to that because 2 tournaments that I've won, I figured it out early, and it maintained through the event. But if you want to be like me and you want to finish in 180th or 170th, or you want to win, that's what you need to do is get so locked into whatever you're doing. The guys like Jacob Wheeler, Jordan Lee, and among a way more, is they're extremely good at adapting. And don't get me wrong, like, if I don't get so locked in at the beginning of practice, I'm extremely good at adapting. Like, especially if I have a bad practice, or like one that maybe at the end of practice I get a couple clues and I get a couple little things figured out. Typically, I'll have a really good tournament because I can translate that into success on the water. But the really bad tournaments are the ones where I get so locked in on the first day. So what I've done throughout my career, and it's ever changing because the bodies of water we go to, or maybe the time of year. But one thing that I do is either lessen my practice. So instead of practicing like for the opens, because unlimited practice, which is kind of dumb. And it's really hard on me because if I go and spend too much time, I'll really screw up. But one thing you can do is lessen your practice. So instead of practicing 5 days, practice 3 days. Or maybe if you're practicing 3 days, practice 2 days. Eliminating some of that practice time will definitely help you get more bites and get you not as locked in, and you'll still have a really, really good tournament. Now, the other thing that I figured out over the years that definitely has helped me to not overdo it or to get too dialed in is if I do go get a couple of bites in practice. Let's say, for instance, Ross Barnett. I go and I get some bites flipping. And I'm like, okay, I got 4 bites flipping reeds. So instead of going and fishing every reed stretch on that lake, I'm just going to go mark ones that I feel like kind of fit the pattern, and therefore run the pattern whenever I get into the tournament. And you'll know real fast if they're going to be on them or not, because let's just say, for instance, my very first stretch that I rolled into in the tournament day, I'd had like 10 or 15 bites down it in practice, and I rolled up there and fished the first 75 yards of it and never had a bite. That should have told me right there, go do something different. But instead, I went and fished a bunch of more water and had very little bites. Obviously, look at my results. I wasn't in the top 10, and I thought there was a pretty legit chance that I would be in the top 10. So, if you can learn anything from my YouTube channel, and don't get me wrong, like, I know we talk about a lot of different stuff here. We talk about, my relationship with MLF, or a lack of. We talk about baits, we talk about techniques, but if you can learn anything from my channel, learn this. This is very important. Don't get too locked in when you're fishing tournaments. Keep an open mind. You hear guys talk about it all the time, and I've heard some of the greatest. Don't get too locked in, and the reason is because each and every one of those guys, including myself, have had events where in practice it was the most amazing bite ever, and then by the time tournament hit, either the sun came out, or the wind stopped blowing, or it got too hot, or it got too cold, or a front blew. There's always variables that change conditions, which and therefore changes the bass behavior. So you have to always keep an open mind. I'll give you a funny story, and a very relevant story. I was at Hartwell one time, and it's been years ago. I was fishing the FLW Tour. Jacob Wheeler and I were talking and sharing a little bit of information at that particular event. And we'd figured out this shad rap bite. We're taking the shad rap, and we're going the backs of these pockets, and we're catching fish. And it was really, really tough. I mean, like, super tough. And this is before forward-facing sonar, so it wasn't like you could just run around and do all that deal. Like, it was actually fishing then. And I start running the pattern, and he does too, and we kind of like meet in the middle after the first hour. And neither one of us, the first day of the tournament, had a bite in the first hour, and we both expected to kind of crack on him that first hour. The bite was pretty good, and neither one of us had a bite. So I just keep running it because I'm like, I don't even know what else to go do because I didn't catch nothing else in practice. Well, we come in to weigh in, and I want to say Wheeler had like 16 or 17 pounds. And I had a pretty decent bag. I had like 13 pounds. And for that particular day, it was a really decent bag. And I'm like, dude, did you crack on him on that shad rap? And he said, no, man, I ended up stopped doing that after the first hour, and I went and did something completely different. And it was that understanding to know to not get so locked in, even though you'd had a bunch of bites on it in practice, to adapt and change no matter what you did in practice doing another technique. Maybe you got a bite doing something else, or maybe you felt like if this particular condition happened that you could get some more bites. But it was at that time that I realized Jacob Wheeler was probably the best in the world because of his quick adapting nature, and just completely throwing his technique out the window and throwing his pattern out the window that we'd both worked so hard to figure out. And it took me about 3 hours to change. And then, now granted, this was pretty early in my career, but like it took me like 3 hours to kind of adjust and change before I kind of figured something else out. It took him an hour. And that's the difference, is lessening that curve, lessening that amount of time that it takes you to change up. So next time, I'm going to challenge you. The next time you're in a tournament and you get out there in the fishing, you blasted them doing this one particular thing, let's just say deep cranking, and you've been catching the fire out of them deep cranking. And let's say, for instance, that first hour you are not catching them. I want you to sit down and I want you to think, okay, why are these fish not biting? Is it because they left? Is it because the conditions change? What changed to make these fish not bite? And if they are not there, go do something different. Don't be scared to change it up and go do something different. And in some cases, it's a simple bait change. Sometimes it's, if you're deep cranking and they're not eating it, maybe it's slowing down. Throwing a Carolina rig, throwing a drop shot, throwing a wacky rig, whatever it may be. And change it up a little bit. Don't be afraid to completely 180 and go a different direction. Guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little bit about my past and my failures, because we all make mistakes. We all have bad tournaments, but learning to adjust from those failures is what's going to make you a better fisherman. And guys, I hope y'all learned a little bit about it, and I hope to see you on the next video.